Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Mastermind. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. My name is Jaime Raul Cepeda. I'm the Executive Vice President at Best Companies Group. And today we're going to be talking about a few very important things to anybody out there who is an HR leader or a business leader, and you want to maximize the potential of your workforce. First, we're going to go into a few key trends that we found at Best Companies Group that matter when you're focusing on inclusion, improving inclusion and belonging within your organization. We're going to go into some of the data there, some of the trends that we're observing, and some of the things that you can actually do in your organization to improve inclusion and create a more inclusive workplace. And then we're going to have a fantastic conversation with some leaders who are walking the talk. They're actually doing the work of creating a best place to work. And I'm going to be asking them a lot of great questions to pull some insights and best practices that hopefully all of you can take back to your organization. So I'm excited for all of you to be here. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And let's get started. So I'm going to go through some slides, right, on some of the key trends that we found at Best Companies Group in our own research and in the work that we've done with clients and some of the work that's going on in the research world around inclusion, right? So hopefully you can take something back to your organization here. These are all strategies for inclusion to create truly exceptional workplaces. Let's start by defining what we mean by inclusion. We're also going to be talking about belonging. These are two important, connected, but slightly different things, right? By inclusion, we mean that people feel like they're included in important decisions, conversations, and that their voice matters. They feel like they are included in the work and the processes that impact their everyday work. Belonging is a little bit different because belonging takes it a step further. And belonging means that they feel connected to the organization that they're a part of, the team that they're a part of, because they're able to show up as themselves, as their full selves, right? With no pretenses. Another way of thinking about this is inclusion means that you're being invited to the party, and belonging means that you feel comfortable enough to have a good time at it, right? So inclusion is you're in, you're connected, you're talking, your voice matters. Belonging means you're comfortable and you can be your full self. You give your 100% potential of who you are, and you can show up fully. Now, in our conversations with a lot of clients that want to get better at inclusion, belonging, engagement, productivity, innovation, all the things that are connected, right? Oftentimes we bump into a series of questions that come up on their end. Things like, well, how do we make sure that we're working on it enough? How do we make sure that we know we're making progress so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle? How do we make it a priority throughout the year? And with all due respect to all those companies out there, I'm saying this with love. I don't mean this in any other way. Really, there's a question behind that question, right? And as a business leader myself, I totally understand where this is coming from, because the question is, what if we don't think inclusion and belonging is that important? Doesn't mean that you don't think it is important. Doesn't mean that you don't think it needs to be worked on. But as we all know, there's a lot of priorities going on. Revenue growth. How do we innovate faster? How do we become a more efficient organization? I get it. And so this sometimes, anything dealing with engagement, people, inclusion, sometimes gets lost in the shuffle and gets bumped off the top 5 priority, right? My recommendation, if you feel like that's happening at your organization, and really the focus of this presentation and some of the things that I'll be sharing with all of you, is you got to combine 2 very important things at the same time: stories and data. Stories are really good at sparking action, at inspiring people, leaders, to say, we have to do something about that. And stories show up in a few different ways. They show up in actual stories from people in your organization. They also show up as aspirations. They show up as experiences that you hope to achieve within your organizational culture. They show up as, what do we do here, right? How do we do the work here? And that's really important. Data is important as well. Data provides understanding. How are we doing right now? And how do we measure that over time to get better? And how do we know that we are getting better, right? It creates some understanding. So stories are great for inspiring action, but they're not very good at creating this very concrete understanding of things. And data is really good at doing that, creating a concrete understanding of things, but they're not very good at inspiring people to move. So you have to combine both at the same time, right? You have to combine both to find a way of creating a more inclusive workplace. The data is really clear on this, right? Whenever you have more inclusion and belonging at your organization, you get better results. People show up fully, they give you their full potential, and something that's very important too on the cost side is you retain them for much longer. You don't have to spend as much time finding the replacement of that top performer that just left your organization, recruiting, advertising, retraining new employees. Those are all real costs. This is where it impacts. And some of the numbers that we have around that is there's an increased intention to stay if inclusion and belonging are doing really well at your organization of 50%. That's 50% fewer employees that you have to think about recruiting for or filling the gap for sometime in the future. Turnover rates drop by 19% across any industry. And certified inclusive workplaces, which we'll talk about in a second, because that's work that we did at Best Companies Group, is to find workplaces that are doing really, really well at this, at certifying them. Certified inclusive workplaces have 91% of their employees satisfied, which of course means they're more willing to stay for longer and to do better work. And when it comes to innovation and revenue, organizations that build an inclusive environment have an ability to outpace their peers by 20% when it comes to innovation revenue. These are all real numbers that hit the bottom and the top line in very real ways. So now let's go into looking into where inclusion shows up currently at your organization, and where does belonging show up currently in your organization. This can be a list of areas and questions that you can consider for yourself when you're thinking, where do I focus on to see if we're doing well there and what we can do to be better? First, we'll start with inclusion. One of the places that it shows up is early on with new hire onboarding. Are you taking the time to not only help new employees understand the role and the skills, but how their role matters to everything else? How their role is important to the success of the company. That helps create this connection of my role is not just the work that I do here, but it's what I end up impacting the teams, the other teams that I impact, the customers, the organization overall. Another place to look and another question to ask is, how often do you review a change with the impacted team before it is final? That is a place where people can feel like their voice matters. Before you update a process, before you launch a new product, before you decide a change in how things get done, are you spending any time sharing that change with the team that will be the most impacted by that change to get their thoughts on it? Doesn't mean that you have to change it or radically change your course, but are you giving them an opportunity to have their voice heard? This is one where a lot of organizations just kind of go off of inertia, right? Whenever they're either hiring new managers or training new managers. A lot of organizations train managers exclusively to be experts at the role. They are technical experts that know how to do the role really well, and they know what to look out for in their team to see that they're doing the work well. But you need to balance that out between experts and coaches. They need to have a coaching side to that too. Why? Because if people don't feel like the manager is providing some level of personalized management to understand their personal needs, aspirations, traits, work styles. Excuse me. They're not gonna feel hurt, right? They're gonna feel, oh, I'm just being told what to do, but I don't have an opportunity to really grow authentically in this organization because my manager really doesn't even know me. So you need to balance the expert side and the coaching side of management. And last year on inclusion is, what kind of story are you telling whenever somebody gets promoted? It's very important to take time to use these moments when somebody's being promoted or recognized to double down on your values. Are you just saying, Mary got promoted to senior manager? Congratulations, Mary, which is fine and good, but doesn't really explain why Mary got promoted, what sort of things other people could do to get promoted or get recognized. And instead saying Mary got promoted because she went above and beyond for her customers and spend a lot of time helping newer members on the team get set up and onboarded. That tells you what kind of values are important in that organization. One thing to always remember, and this is not just for inclusion, but it's really for anything when it comes down to employee communication. If you're not telling a story, a full story, the employees are telling a story to themselves in their own head, right? A vacuum of information means that employees create their own scenario, and oftentimes it's the worst case scenario. It's always important to go a little bit further in communication, even if it's not all the details, if you don't have everything figured out, but just to kind of give them more than less. Otherwise, they'll fill in the gap with their own worst case scenarios, usually. Now let's talk about belonging. Where does belonging show up? Well, belonging shows up in a couple of the same places, but in different ways. First, on promotions, right? Do people at your organization feel that promotions are fair to employees? That there's a sense of fairness based on work or merit, not based on who you know, right? And have you asked? Has this question come up in the past in an employee engagement survey, focus groups, one-on-ones that you ask your managers to do with everybody on their team? If you don't know, you should definitely ask to create some sense of understanding of how well we're doing there. You might be surprised at how employees think about this. Next, do employees feel like recognition and growth at your organization is based on merit or favoritism? It's a little bit similar to promotion, but different, because now we're doubling down on favoritism, right? Favoritism, any sense of favoritism or politicking or anything like that, is super toxic when it comes down to creating a sense of inclusion and belonging at your organization. People can't feel like they're included or that they belong at the organization when they see a story, right, next to them of somebody who is getting a lot more than they are, not because of merit, not because of hard work, but simply who they are, right? And so then for them, for the employee, it's like, well, clearly I don't belong here because I'm not that person, or I'm not that kind of person. They start pulling back, and then disengaging and having a very negative experience. Now, do you offer more than one kind of communication channel? This is one that, in my conversations with companies directly, often does not get considered. I'll give you an example of an organization that I worked with through Best Companies Group where this happened. There is an organization that for many years had low scores on their employee engagement surveys that we did with them on communication. People felt like the communication wasn't detailed enough, like it didn't have enough detail, it wasn't frequent enough, and that important updates weren't shared at all. And this was puzzling to the senior leadership team, saying, well, we share it all the time. Like this, the benefits change we just made, the new product we just launched, we communicated the heck out of that for months. How are they saying that they don't know what's going on? And so when we dove deeper on this in a workshop, we figured out that they were communicating a lot for sure, but using one mode of communication. They were doing it in town halls. They were doing it in public Q&As. They were doing it in lunch and learns. What do these things have in common? They have in common is that they are very extrovert friendly. What happens to the introverts in the organization? They feel like they cannot really have a conversation or share their question because that's just not their style. They're going to shy away from it and pull back and think, well, I don't have an opportunity to share what I really think about this or have my voice heard. So they considered new options. They started doing more communication via social intranets, submitting questions in advance via email, using Slido, which is a app that you can use where people can submit their question anonymously, even for town halls, and others can upvote it. Other opportunities where introverts would get an opportunity to have their voice heard, and over time their communication scores increased just by doing something like that. So think about, am I catering to just one kind of communicator in my organization, or am I diversifying that to be connected to the diverse workforce that I have? This is a big one too. It's all about psychological safety, right? Can people offer respectful criticism without fear of negative consequences? There was a study by Google done years ago called Project Aristotle. And here their pursuit was to understand what makes a great team. What separates a mediocre from a great team? And initially their hypotheses were like everybody else's, right? Well, it's probably about skill. It's probably about seniority. They found out that that was not the case. Those were important for sure. But what was most important by far was psychological safety. Do people in the team feel like they can truly speak up, be themselves, criticize each other's work respectfully without fear of negative contributions or negative consequences? I'm sorry. Do they feel like they can really say what they want to say without being pushed back for some reason? Psychological safety was a big differentiator between mediocre and great teams. And it also ends up creating a sense of belonging and a sense of innovation and collaboration that will benefit you in many ways. So Best Companies Group over the last 18 months has done a research project where we've surveyed over 100 companies, thousands of employees, to find the most inclusive workplaces in America. And so far we have honored many organizations. You might see this badge pop up here and there, Inclusive Workplace. It's a program that we continue to do every year. It's actually open right now. So if you want to take a look at the link, you can get more information on it. It's free to participate. And here we surveyed hundreds of companies, thousands of employees, to find out what really matters when we look at inclusion and what are some of the best places for inclusion doing that we can all learn from. And so I'm going to share some of those insights today. First, one of the things that popped up from certified inclusive workplaces that they do really, really well is that effort matters. Note that I said effort, not results. Results are important for sure, but effort still matters. 91% of employees at these companies really appreciated the progress and the commitment from their employer. The question we asked was not, do you think things are way better? Is like, do you see that your employer is committed to creating a more inclusive workplace? And 91% of them said yes, and I appreciate that. It really matters to just actually do the work, even if you're not there yet. Communication was really important. Opportunities to share ideas freely made a big impact. That goes back to the idea of psychological safety. Growth opportunities, very important as well. Our new roles, growth projects, or professional development opportunities shared fairly? Is everybody encouraged to apply or jump into these opportunities, or are they exclusive to a select few? Next is cultural competence training. 90% of employees appreciated the training provided by their employer, especially when it was targeted to help train managers be better at this. And the role of the manager was probably the biggest driver and who ended up being an inclusive workplace and who didn't. Manager roles and inclusion are huge for a lot of the reasons that I've been talking about already. Is managers can really make their teams thrive by offering some level of personalized management, where they get to truly understand their team and meet them where they are and help them grow from there, as well as creating this sense of psychological safety where everybody is included, everybody has a voice, everybody can feel heard. And just so you all know, if you have questions on this, let me know. Feel free to put them in the question box. We'll work through those as we go through this. And if we run out of time right after the panel, we'll combine the questions from this with the questions from the panel as well. Okay. Now, there were some spots where even the best were struggling. These are area opportunities, even for those that we found were doing really, really well on inclusion and belonging. And it was all around hiring and career development. 20% of employees at these certified inclusive workplaces were unsure if they thought their employers encouraged employees of different backgrounds to apply to higher positions. They were not sure. They didn't disagree, but they were like, you know what? I'm still trying to make up my mind, or sometimes I see it happen and others I don't. It's inconsistent. 20%, that's 1 out of every 5 employees at these organizations. And 10% outright said, I do not think that my employer is transparent about promotions, right? That's 1 out of 10 employees do not believe that the path to promotion is transparent at these organizations that are doing a really great job of inclusion. I share that to say, if you're struggling and you're on your journey, it's okay. There's a lot to be done here. And even for the best, there's opportunities. So I want to share a quick experiment that happened years ago where 2 groups were asked to put together a presentation for a panel of judges. It was like a pitch presentation where, they were essentially saying, they were pitching their idea to get investment funding, right? One group was not given any guidance other than just go out there and do your best. They were left alone. The other group was told to still do your best, but they were given information on the judges and asked to cater the presentation as much as possible to the judges, right? As much as possible so that it would resonate with the judges and spend time doing that. Guess which group ended up doing better when it came to persuasion, preparation, the polish of the presentation, and overall quality? It was the first group that was not given any guidance, which is surprising, right? They were not given any guidance, just say go out there and do your best. What the experiment was doing at the exact same time as all this was happening is they had scanners right to their brain, connect to their brain to kind of monitor brain activity and see what parts of the brains were really flaring up during the exercise. And they found out that the group that was told to just go out there and do your best spent the majority of their brain power, in a way, focused on the task, right? The executive part of their brain were just focused on getting the work done and doing their best. The other team that was given all this extra guidance and in a way, kind of like nudging to cater to the judges, was spending a smaller percentage of that, of their brain on the task, and a larger percentage of their brain kind of like monitoring their own behavior. So you get where this is going, is when you have an inclusive environment where people can just truly show up as who they are, they don't have to put up a pretense or a mask or just pretend they're someone else, and can just spend their time doing great work, you get a much larger percentage of their mind and their body and their brain doing the work than if you make it unsafe for them to do that. That's the power of inclusion and belonging. So I'm going to go through these next couple of slides a little bit faster because I know that I'm running out of time. But these are spots where you can think of where to do a few things, where to get started if you're starting just barely thinking about your journey of creating a more inclusive workplace, and then some of the things that you can do moving forward. First, figure out your baseline, figure out where you are today. An employee engagement survey can be really helpful for this. So can focus groups, so can pulse surveys, so can just any other data that you might have. But you got to create first a baseline before you'd even do anything to get a sense of where you are. Next, start at the top and stay at the top as long as needed. That means you need to have leadership buy-in at the top so that this is not an initiative that kicks off and then fizzles soon after. There needs to be buy-in on why this is important organizationally before you cascade it down and have others work on it. Otherwise, it'll start, but it'll quickly run out of steam. Next, pick your KPI. One of the most popular ones around this work is things like retention. If you have like a certain target for demographic groups that you want to hire and promote, things like that. It could also be other KPIs, right? Like innovation. How many patents are we putting out there now or in the future as we create a more inclusive workplace? How is revenue, growing within the organization? Are you becoming more productive by being more efficient and profitable? Pick your KPI that's going to be your North Star. It could be more than one throughout the process. All right. So what do you do to keep things moving after you're done there, right? After you've kicked things off? A few things. First, does everybody know what you're working on? Are you communicating on a regular basis? Even if it's small things, you need to make sure that it's top of mind and it's something that, is being, shown out there within the organization more often than once. And then who owns this effort? And guess what? It is not HR. I know it is not HR. HR leads it, but you need to have somebody in addition to HR that leads this effort, somebody else in the C-suite, ideally the CEO. The CEO needs to also be speaking to this and the importance of this on a regular basis. Otherwise, just like with, leadership alignment, it'll kick off, but it'll fizzle out. And then it's going to make it a lot harder for you to pick it back up later on, right? It's almost better to not do something until you're ready than to do something, let it go quiet and nothing happens, and then try again, because then employees start to lose trust in the process as these things start but don't go anywhere. Celebrate humbly. That means celebration is very important to this, but also add to it, we got more work to do, and here's what we got to do next, right? Celebration is super important to keep the momentum going, but you also have to, notify them that the path is still, moving forward. And then stay focused on the KPIs. There's nothing wrong with changing your KPI midway through the process. Just make sure that it's done in a thoughtful way and there's an explanation as to why, not just we haven't really got results and we're getting impatient. Be thoughtful about your KPIs, especially if you're thinking about changing them. So the last thing I'll say here is I ask you all to think about all this and imagine what can happen if you get this right. Imagine an environment where ideas matter, not who said them. Imagine an environment where people give it their all and are giving their organization their full potential every day. And imagine an environment where all the right people are invited to the party and they all get to have fun as a team. All right, this is my hope for all of you with this information. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that you do great work and do your best. Thank you. So here's my information. In case any of you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, send me a note. I'm happy to share this presentation. Just send me a note and I can forward it over to you. I hope this was helpful. So now we'll conclude this part of the conversation and we're going to move over to our panel. So let me stop sharing here. All right, great. So I'm thrilled to welcome our fantastic panel here. We're going to have a great conversation, and these are folks that are representing outstanding businesses, and they are leaders that truly are in best places to work. So everybody here that you're talking to and that you're going to hear from are from best places to work. So they're walking the talk. So take out your notebooks. There's going to be some good best practices being shared here. I hope that, I'm pretty fast on the pen. I don't know about all of you, but you're going to want to be ready for this. So let's jump right in. And let me first introduce our amazing panelists. First, we have Marcy Kloss, Assistant Vice President of Human Resources for Pro Assurance Corporation. Welcome, Marcy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. And then next, we have Joyce Dennington, Director of Human Resources at the Hainer Hoyt Corporation. Welcome, Joyce.
Hi there.
And last but not least, we have Ronnie Ells, Chief Financial Officer of Antioch Corporation. Welcome, Ronnie.
Hello.
All right. So let's start our discussion by talking about the workplace dynamics in 2024, which, we could have the whole session focus on that, but we do have a couple of, questions and topics around this they want to go into. Now, remote work, hybrid work models, that's just, you hear about the news all the time, and it just seems to be something that's just going to stick around for a while, right? There's the, there's the every once a week op-ed, remote work is dead, and then the next week is remote work is back, or like hybrid work. It just goes back and forth. So I'd love to hear from all of you, and let's start with Marcy. Can you share like some ways where you fostered collaboration and cohesion in a remote or work environment within your organization? I'm sorry, remote or hybrid work environment in your organization.
Yes, sure. So we definitely are in a remote and hybrid work environment. We really transitioned to that after COVID. And so just a couple of different ways that come to mind. So for us, we instituted what we call moments that matter in the organization. And those can be, on a different cadence. So we have some areas that those moments that matter are weekly, some that are monthly, some that are also quarterly throughout the year. But that's really time where people come together in person and, spend time talking about, what are our key priorities? Where do we look like from a result standpoint? And a really important piece of that is really the social and team building aspect. So bringing all of that together, having that sort of focused time where everyone is in person, because we are hybrid and remote most of the time in our workplace.
Great. Thank you, Marcy. How about you, Joyce? How's Hoyt dealing with this?
Pretty good. We have always been, I think, remote or hybrid. We are a construction company, so 2/3 of our employees are out on projects at any one time, and about 1/3 of us are in the office on a regular basis. So we have always been, even before COVID, in this sort of hybrid remote environment. Not to say that it hasn't increased since COVID, but I think to keep us sort of connected is we do intentionally plan some regular events throughout the year and have added events throughout the year to make sure that employees can get together on a strictly social basis and across departments, but also some regular regular mandatory meetings. Sometimes those are quarterly in a large operations department, and other times those are semi-annual employee meetings where we give updates of things like that. So it's also an opportunity for employees to share socially what's been going on. And during those meetings, we focus on work-related stuff, but we also focus on fun stuff like, if anybody has a baby, we're putting it up on the screen, promotions, we have pictures of people, and we do tell a story about, who's gotten promoted and why. So it has been sort of a normal status quo for us to focus on this, but those are some of the things that we've put in place, and they continue to grow.
So I'm hearing that the in-person opportunities are very intentional, right?
Yes.
Not just in person to be in person. Mm-hmm.
Right. We certainly, as a matter of necessity through COVID, implemented more virtual meetings, and we have that. But even around virtual meetings, we require that people keep their camera on, that they keep their microphones on, so then they are present. Certainly if you get a text message during a meeting, you're answering it, but even that small kind of requirement improves as Marcy said, the moments that matter. So,
Thanks. Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah.
How about you, Ronnie?
So managing kind of the expectations around remote and hybrid, it continues to be a challenge for us, I would say. We do find we have a small percentage of our employees that are rarely in the office, and no surprise, those tend to be the most disengaged. Those that are really searching for, they were brought on as an in-office employee, and now they got used to that remote opportunity.
Hmm.
Because we're on the smaller side and we really want our employees to work collaboratively, and kind of the area that we're in with in technology, we need to get engineers together in a room to chat, to pick at each other's ideas and figure out what's wrong. So we really are actively discouraging anybody who's looking to be remote, 3 days or more. We really would like that 3 days to be the minimum in office.
Hmm.
Part of it is, on the recruiting side, we, we have to invest in, younger college graduates. And the only way to teach them is by having those experienced engineers in-house, kind of holding their hands and showing them what they learn. And
Yeah.
kind of to what Joyce and Marcy said, we're kind of, trying to go above and beyond for the staff when they're on site. We do nerd outs where, we intentionally, let the employees kind of present their hobby, what they do outside of work, so they can create that social environment. Probably like everybody here and everybody on the call, we're buying a lot more food and bringing a lot more food into the office. And, even as recent as this weekend, I was, we have a spare conference room that we hardly use, and we converted it to a fitness center for the employees. So definitely trying to encourage them to spend more time in the office and to work and be collaborative when they're here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's usually where the negative impact of too much remote work comes in, is, not only the collaboration, but also the community, right? Where you just, especially for newer employees, younger employees, it's so important to them figuring out how things get done here. Who can I talk to as a potential mentor? If you don't have those serendipitous moments in the office, how do you get ahead? How do you get going? Yeah.
Exactly.
Are any of you using any technology to enhance the workplace experience, as we're talking about like remote and hybrid work? Are you all using anything, like any apps or software that's helped you create that sense of cohesion?
Yeah, I'll say I'm happy to jump in there. A couple things, and probably not anything earth-shattering necessarily, but we are definitely relying on Teams more, not just for the day-to-day business communication, but for example, our employee engagement groups, we call them team member engagement groups, or team eggs. So we have channels, dedicated to those groups. We have channels dedicated to pet lovers and travel lovers and those types of things, just to create more opportunities for people to connect on things that, aren't about their day-to-day role that they have inside the organization. Those seem to be, that seems to be really impactful. The other technology that has really made a big impact for us in the last few years is our recognition platform. So we previously did not have any type of formal, recognition tool, and we do use a tool now that, it's, we're using it for everything from that, just, thank you between peers, to, recognizing service anniversaries, to, managers have the ability to actually award points as a way of recognizing, effort individually and project teams and things like that. We tie it to our wellness activities too. So if you're participating in things, you can earn points for those types of things as well. So we feel like it's definitely sort of opened up the culture in that way of, it not only is a great way to recognize people, but it gives you some visibility into things that are happening outside of your area that you may not otherwise know about, because you see people talking about it there. So those are two things for us that we feel like have a pretty strong impact on community and culture.
Yeah. Joyce, did you have one too?
Again, nothing earth-shattering, but we leverage a lot of social media. We have some great marketing staff, and they're almost like daily or weekly posts to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, whatever. And So you'll get to see, we celebrate National Pet Day, and we ask employees to send in, a small competition between who looks most like their pet. And it's not, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, another thing I got to do. But you just take the picture and you send it, and somebody else runs with it. So we're fortunate enough to have some great posts about things like that. We have a community committee who focuses on a charity of the month. And, we either bring in gently used clothing, or we had another blood donation, a blood drive. And so we do a lot of social media posts, and it gets everybody to understand what the company's doing on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I learned, because I think when you're in HR, we have a tendency to say, well, I really would like to implement one big thing that everybody's going to get on board with. And what I've learned over the past, whether it's benefits or something like this, is that, we're probably going to need, as someone talked about, multiple communication platforms, whether it's email, social media. We have an app that we use to communicate community announcements or company announcements that also ties in with their payroll. So it drives people to one platform to find information. But we realize that it's going to be a bunch of small issues or small benefits. It's not going to be one big thing. We have to leverage multiple platforms. So,
Yeah. Well,
One thing I was just wanted to add was with I know you both had mentioned Microsoft Teams, and one kind of innovative way that I've learned that my employees are using it kind of with our other tools here is because we write more embedded level software and stuff, but my employees really like doing all this technology stuff outside of work. So they've actually formed little clubs, around, FPGA, field programmable logic, and they will use Microsoft Teams, and they obviously are using some of our corporate tools to write software. And, our more senior engineers are showing the junior engineers how to write software and just little controls and stuff like that. But, it's allowing, interactions among these levels of employees that, they get, and it gives the flexibility for those that are out of office, or a lot of times this is after hours. It lets, anybody who wants to participate. And it was going on for months, and, the executive team, we weren't aware of it outside of an employee asking, hey, could we use the tool for this? It's like, sure.
Yeah. So here, like, some of them just come up organically, right, for employees, and some of them, do require some planning and programming, right, on the business side. And now, Joyce, I'm curious to see who won the contest of you look most like your pet.
It's believe it or not, we have a bunch of high performers, so everything's a competition. And it's fun. So
that's awesome. I love it. All right, so we got a question coming in here, so I'm gonna encourage everybody to submit your question. We're gonna answer them at the end. We're gonna get through a few more topics here, but we will definitely get to all your questions before we wrap up. So I want to segue now into a little bit of a broader topic, which is workplace culture, right? We already talked about this in a few different ways, right? Like, things like contests, moments that matter. These are all things that truly end up creating the culture. It's not just surface level perks. Important, obviously, those are great and they impact people's lives. But when we all think about culture, it goes beyond that. It goes to behaviors and what can I expect, right, to happen here. And so I'd like to talk about that, and also, find ways where you all can share how you measure culture in your own way at your organization. So the first question, and I'll start again with you, Marcy, is how do you measure employee satisfaction, and what sort of metrics do you use to tell you how things are going around that?
I would say we do that in a few different ways. I mean, surveys are definitely something that we rely on a good bit, not just the Best Companies Group survey, which we definitely do want to get that sort of full set of feedback on a regular basis. We also use quarterly pulse surveys, and kind of keep those very focused on a specific topic, 2-3 questions at most. Things like with new hires, we have a 30 and 90-day survey just to check in on, do they understand, the company, and are they making that connection with their role, and does it meet the expectations set in the interview, and those types of things. At the end of our performance management process, did you have a meaningful conversation with your manager through this process? Do you know what your next career step could be? So just trying to leverage that in a few different ways and in different mediums. But those are, a few ways that we measure that engagement and satisfaction.
Joyce, Ronnie, do you do something similar or different to that?
Pretty similar. I think, certainly we do the Best Company survey, and we track that, and we also present the results over time to our teams. So it is a sense of pride and creates a huge sense of community. We do a lot of marketing before, or information to our employees before the actual survey comes out. But some of the other things, to drive our culture, I think employees want to see people walk the talk. And we actually have incorporated our values that define our culture. We've incorporated those into every performance review for every employee. So employees get rated or feedback on the values such as teamwork, safety, customer service. Those values are in every annual review, and also sort of mid-year reviews if we have those. And they're the same for whether it's a senior team member or an entry-level employee. So we drive our culture through those behaviors or competencies that we require.
I would say the only, or it's a couple other things I would just add, that we do is, we have an employee benefits committee that helps drive a lot of our benefits discussions and things like that. They meet pretty regularly, usually monthly. Sometimes they, push out their dates, but we intentionally, don't let any of us executives be on that committee so that the employees can talk among themselves. And usually once a quarter, I ask, the committee to invite me kind of after their discussion so that they, have an opportunity to, bring up any issues they have or things they want to talk about. Once they've had time to digest it and really think out what they want to ask for. We find that works really well. And probably the best way that I'm able to gauge employee satisfaction, and it's, for me, it works because we're a smaller company, around, 40 employees or so. It's really the one-on-one conversations. And granted, yes, I have to kind of shift how I talk to different people. Some people are very direct, very, extroverted, and other people are very introverted, and you need to relate to them before you can get good feedback. But those conversations, usually one-on-one, you're able to get great information, and it gives me feedback that I can quickly act on. Is there something upsetting you? What can I do to fix it? Is there an IT issue? Let me get on it. Those one-on-one conversations, are great.
Yeah. There's an opportunity, right, to start broadly with the survey or any, organization-wide kind of feedback mechanism, and then use that to target down to specific either issues or parts of the organization that might require a conversation, right? A one-on-one conversation or a focus group. Yeah. I love to hear from all of you a success story, right, for an HR initiative that you end up doing at your organization or leading at your organization that you believe had like a really transformative impact on your workplace? This is totally the opportunity to brag. Open floor for bragging, very well accepted, but really like, something that you think that ended up really moving the needle in terms of workplace culture, employee engagement, satisfaction on the HR initiative side. And so whoever wants to jump in first.
I can go first on this one.
All right, Ryan.
You scare me a little bit with the word transformative. Because we're a smaller organization, often HR initiatives really is a bit more encompassing. It usually includes me and the other executives and some of our managers. One thing that I'm very proud of, and it's been going on for the probably the last year, since last summer, we really made it a focused effort, was during the summer and in these when we have good weather. We try to do it 2-3 times a month. We were trying to do it weekly, but it became a little much. But a member of the executive team would go outside. We got a grill, and we'd grill food for the employees. And I know food's always one of those things that brings people together. Sometimes we had really good food, steak or chicken. Other times it was, sausage and burgers. And although the food was good, I think the best thing about this is it really got a chance for all the different levels of staff to kind of come together and socialize. We had a picnic table set up. Even employees that, they work in different technology areas where they normally wouldn't interact, or, if they were on a team together, they were working on completely different parts of a project. Gives them an opportunity to network and socialize. And, I'm not going to say it's a surprise, but, from a productivity standpoint, it really gave and gives our junior engineers a low risk environment to ask questions. When I ask a question to the technical people, a dumb question, it gives them a chance to ask those dumb questions and bat around project problems with those senior staff members without the pressure of being, hey, I'm on the lab, I'm in the lab, I'm billable, stuff like that. So
right.
It's as silly as grilling outside, but the employees love it, and it definitely helps the culture and improves productivity.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ronnie. Marcy,
again, I agree with Ronnie. Transformative. Oh my gosh. I don't know any HR professional who would want to do a transformation. Small steps is good. Small steps. I don't know if I can take credit for this, but and I certainly can't, but we moved our offices about 9 or 10 months ago, and into a more updated space, and certainly that was our owner's decision. But the feedback that we in that process was that we really needed some training space. We had done some training in our large conference room prior to the move, and now we have a training room that can seat 30 people with tables. We have 2 projector screens. We have a whiteboard. We can do streaming. It has, I don't know about transformed, but it has provided an opportunity for larger groups to come in, and it provides a venue for us to train in person. We certainly do some training, virtual, but it provides us an opportunity to get with people across the organization. We have about 175 employees. So if we have a annual initiative on training, which in New York State we do it in person. And we find that is the best way to remove those negative assumptions that we have about each other. And when we get to talk beforehand, and food is big, you got to provide food. When HR does a training, there is food involved. So everybody wants to come. But I think it really has put a different spin on training. There's been more of it, and also people look forward to it.
And I'll jump in there. So I would say our organization has come together over the years through mergers and acquisitions. So we're still made up of what we call lines of business. So sort of different focus areas. And several years back, actually through a survey similar to Best Companies Group, we recognized the need for, really consistent leadership, management, training, and development. We're doing those as we could throughout the organization, but really didn't have consistency. And at this point, we're in about 40 states. And so it's difficult to bring people together, although I miss those days of really being able to bring people together like Ronnie and Joyce have shared. So through that initiative, we developed a 3-tier leadership development program, really focusing on that foundational first level leadership for managers and supervisors and aspiring leaders. That was our first priority, and it's really taken off throughout the organization. It's something that leaders, but also aspiring leaders, really take a lot of pride in completing and participating in. And so it gives us that consistency in, the development topics. And, those are everything from family medical leave through really coaching and developing your team. And so it's given us that consistent, opportunity to provide those messages and to really build that leadership skill, but also connects people across different lines of business who don't work together every day when they participate in those instructor-led live sessions. They're not in person, but live through Zoom. They're participating and learning from each other and asking questions and really building relationships that they, take with them outside of those training sessions. So I don't want to take credit for that, but certainly the organization is something that's been really important for us.
Well, if you all don't want to give yourselves a pat on the back, I will do that for you. I'm sure that those are all sound great initiative ideas. I'm sure they took a lot of work, a lot of planning, and not only getting them started, but keeping them going, right? Because then that becomes an expectation for employees. And I don't know if anybody noticed it, but things must be going really well at Vantion, because I heard Ronnie say that sometimes they do steaks as part of it for everybody. So
they're not ribeyes.
I'm going to be checking your careers page, Ronnie, see if you're hiring. Steaks, all right. So let's talk about hiring for a second, right? Hiring, recruiting, talent acquisition. It's an interesting time for that, right? Because you go back to a year or two ago, it's the Great Resignation, and like so many folks are just shifting from one company to another, one industry to another. From most of the things out there says that is over. However, there's still some challenges of a lot of open roles, time to hire longer than we'd like it to be, very industry specific, right, challenges. So I'd love to get your thoughts on just some of the trends that you've noticed when it comes down to, the talent landscape, recruiting and finding your talent out there. Like, what are you seeing as some of like the trends that you're trying to get ahead of, and what are you doing to find the right talent for your organization, considering that? So let's start again with you, Marcy, and then we'll go around.
Okay. Certainly, it is interesting times. It has been challenging. We definitely went through what lots of other organizations with a good deal of turnover over a couple of years, and hopefully that sort of settled down for us. And we're in a pretty niche market, so we're all competing for the same talent. It's a fairly small talent pool, and so it can be very competitive. Where organizations, some may be willing to really pay beyond what really seems feasible and where we should be paying. And it's difficult to compete in that market, but we have been able to do so. And one of the things that maybe other organizations have done in the past that's relatively new for us is really looking at the data and the talent that we have been able to take from competitors and other organizations, really asking them about what is it about ProAssurance, what drew you to us, what things were difficult for you in the past that are better here, who do you know that could really be someone that we should target, looking for any of those types of opportunities to really lean on the expertise of our team members, which I really think in most cases, they very much appreciate being asked, for that input and what's working, what isn't working, how can we do something different, to really help us be a place that you want to stay long term. One of the things for us too that's been a focus for the last several years is a very intentional focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is, you talked about at Jaime originally, something that was very important to our CEO. And so we've spent a lot of time really working towards the strategies that we have now, and having someone in our DEI program manager who works with a council of team members, who really drives the priorities of that work for the organization. And we feel like that's been really impactful as well for our current team members, but also really in recruiting for talent to know that that's something that's important to the organization. So those are two things for us that have been really important over the last few years.
Great. What about you, Joyce?
It certainly is a candidate-driven market. It is a huge challenge. Our turnover has slowed. It was never a lot to begin with, but during the peak of COVID, we did see a lot of people jump when companies were buying talent. A couple of the strategies, the trends that I see, turnover slowed, hiring salaries are still higher than we'd like from other companies. However, I do see that they have plateaued a little bit. They don't continue to rise as much as they were. Some of the strategies we do is, when we make an offer to an employee or to a potential candidate, I actually do a total reward statement, typical, and I send it to them along with a written offer that shows, not only the gross wages, but the value of the benefits, and broken down specifically to each benefit, how much the company pays, how much we pay. And then also, we bonus, so I include that. So it's not a guarantee, and we're very clear on that. It's not a guarantee of earnings, but it is a typical what someone could earn in a year. So we found that is helpful for them when some employees are only looking at gross salaries. Ours are competitive between the 50 and 75th percentile of our industry survey. But, we also focus on hiring from colleges in the area. So we do a huge push to get interns in. This summer, and actually in like 15 days, I have the largest intern class. So we have, I think, 14 interns plus another 4 hires that are college graduates. So we have a very large intern program, and they get coaches assigned to them. And we try to get them in the pipeline very early. That allows them not only to, understand what the work is like and get that workplace experiential learning for their college credits or their major requirements, but also they get a chance to test drive some of the things that I have a difficulty putting on that total reward statement, like the fun times, the golf tournament, the pizza truck that comes, the ice cream truck, like all of that fun stuff that I can't put on a dollar amount, a statement. And so hopefully that is attractive. It's almost like a summer long sports recruitment for a college. We get them in for a recruiting summer, and so we are intentional about that. So it's still very challenging and very difficult. But we try to get some feedback, as Marcy said, we try to get some feedback about how we can continue to improve this. We also do employee referral bonuses. So I actually report out not only to our senior team, but in our employee newsletter that goes to everyone, how many referrals have come from employees, and we pay them for the referrals. So if they're eligible, certainly senior team isn't eligible. So yeah, that has been, you just have to constantly communicate that. So
Yeah,
those are some of the things we've done.
that's great. Thank you so far. Yeah. How about you, Ronnie?
During the Great Resignation, we did not get hammered too much on it, even though as a smaller company, we had a hard time, we have a hard time competing with the large industry or the large companies salary-wise, salaries and benefits. One of the reasons, from talking to employees and surveys is they really value the diversity of work they get here. Whereas, if they go to a major manufacturer, yes, they may be engineering a cool product, but they're likely engineering that cool product for 18 months to 2 years, and then they may be in charge of, helping maintain it.
Right.
Whereas here, my engineers can be on, 3 to 4 different projects at once. Usually within their discipline, they're jumping between different projects, working in industries and areas that are of interest to them. And we definitely allow them to grow into different areas that they just have an interest in. I have 2 hardware engineers that, they wanted to get experience on the software side, and we've found work for them to get them in there and start learning it. And they're doing awesome at it, because they have that background knowledge. So as you move that to kind of the recruitment landscape, it's trying to communicate those soft benefits to, new hires or prospects. We try very hard to make sure we communicate it, but, to kind of Joyce's point, the easiest way we have found to communicate it is by bringing the kids in as co-ops and having them live the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Our co-ops go back to our IT and they brag about the work that they've been doing. Whereas, they have friends that went to those large companies and they got really good at operating the coffee machine, so it's cool to see them, go back and do that. The other, another trend I would say that we definitely have shifted to through COVID, and I don't want to tick any sponsors off, is we definitely have tried to focus on in-house recruitment as opposed to, before we used to always have to pay a headhunter fee, unless it's a very niche high-level engineer we're looking for. We're going to try to recruit for it directly. And I would much rather turn that recruitment fee into either a referral fee for an employee. Similar to you, Joyce, we pay a referral fee out if they refer an employee. And the other way is I'd rather pay it to, as a signing bonus or something to get that employee to sign right away and, join the team. So it's, kind of reallocating those dollars from a recruiter to, more the candidate or the employees directly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing across everybody here, your answers is just like a couple of things, right? Is obviously being resourceful, and also playing to your strengths, right? So, and a lot of that is employer branding, right? Is putting out there what it really is to work here and talking about not just the salary, but everything else that we can offer, right? Either, benefits and really the value of that, the opportunities to connect, the projects that you can work on here versus others. So it's really just like playing to, the strengths rather than trying to be a different kind of organization. You're not gonna win that battle because there are other kinds of organizations out there. So I'm just hearing a lot of like resourcefulness and playing to your strengths, which is great. So I'm looking at the time. We do have we're running a little bit low on time, which is perfectly fine, and we do have a couple of questions in. So I'm going to be just going to maybe a couple last ones here for everybody here, and then we're going to switch over to questions from the audience. So one that I'm really curious to hear from all of you is, like lessons learned in the pursuit of creating a more positive workplace culture, right? There's a lot of work that needs to get done around this, a lot of pitfalls along the way, and you've all obviously, are very seasoned in doing this kind of work. So I'd love for you all to share some things, right? Like some challenges that you faced in maintaining a positive workplace culture, and what did you do to address them? It could be at your current organization or in the past. What have you bumped into to say, hey, lesson learned here, learn from my mistakes, or from the things that I've noticed. And let's start again with you, Marcy.
Okay. Just a couple things, not that, there are plenty of challenges, a couple to share that come to mind. I think I mentioned on the previous question. So we've grown as an organization largely through mergers and acquisitions. And so we are made up of different organizations that have come together over time. So as you can imagine, each time that happens, where a new group of team members joins the organization, it can not only be challenging for the new people to the organization, but also the folks who are already a part of the organization, how you really bring that together, how ensuring that everyone kind of understands like where we're going, how we're going to get there, how they're a part of how we're going to get there and why. And so, I feel like that each time we go through something like that, you learn more about, just the importance of leadership and ensuring that, senior leaders at every level of the organization have that understanding and they can really communicate that effectively. So that, whether it's a team member that's been with the organization for a while or someone new, they can ask those questions. They can come when they're unsure about what's going on and get a better understanding of what's happening in the organization. So that communication challenge, I think, is something that we would wrestle with each time and try to improve upon that technique. I think the other thing that's a challenge is for us and maybe for other organizations is having really clear resources and tools for your team members actually contributes really largely to their experience and their engagement and satisfaction. And so something that we have been learning is, if we have multiple tools for doing one thing, that can be really challenging and frustrating for team members. So how can we continue to sort of consolidate that has been a lot of our focus and strategy over the last few years, whether it's communication tools or actually our policy administration systems, that people know where to go to do what and they can do it efficiently. Definitely has had a big impact on our organization.
Yeah. Thanks, fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Marcy. What about you, Joyce?
I think one of the challenges in the past 5 years is that, when we have interns coming in or even new hires, we partner them with a coach, and that term is intentional as opposed to a mentor or something. It is really a coach. Years ago, I remember that we quickly realized that some of the coaches who were really good in their job were not the best trainers, right? I seen heads nodding, right? Everybody, yes. And I thought to myself, what were we thinking, So now we are much more intentional at choosing the right coaches because we had a couple of years of really smart, capable people not being great teachers. And so now we actually, before the intern classes come, we do coaches training. And we sit down, and it sounds so, common sense, but at the time we thought everybody's able to teach this stuff, or at least find, show the intern how to find the information, when really it was, we had to put down some intentional expectations, and that including, the teaching our coaches what our company expectations are of interns, because as you know, they're different than employees who are coming in with, so when they show up 10 minutes late, is that acceptable or not? Even down to that in the weeds kind of stuff. So we do some serious training. We also have our coaches do a personality assessment, and we share that with the incoming intern. And then at the end of the summer, we also have the intern rate their coach, and the coaches know that. So they have some skin in the game. And so they know that, if they want to keep doing it, and if they don't rate well, we get to the bottom of it. And, So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we learned. We need to be much more intentional about who we choose, and it can't always be the same, but then we also have to train those coaches. We can't expect just because you're good at your job that you're also good at training others. So I think that was one of our biggest things we've learned.
That's great. How about you, Ronnie?
I'm probably going to speak to a different demographic here. As the CFO, HR was one of those responsibilities that just kind of fell into my lap as, hey, you get to take care of all that compliance
Lucky
stuff.
you.
Yeah.
I never planned to be in HR. In fact, when I tell my friends and family what I do and kind of all the different things that fall underneath me, they act shocked and surprised that someone would put me in charge of it. I had a lot of professional growing to do, and I'm sure I still do. But, with that, one of my biggest shocks and one of the challenges I had to, working on overcoming still are, just the topic of kind of disinterested employees. All of us have good employees that are just not interested in, your workplace events and your cultural things going on. They have other focuses, I'm one of those people that I can work 100, 120 hours a week and I love it. I'm focused on it. Other people, as soon as they're done with those 40 hours, they're out the door, their mind's off. It could be family, could be friends. I have some employees that even if they take a 5-minute break, they're turning off work. So it can be really hard to facilitate different events and things that will appeal to them. So when I brought up starting out in HR, and I think one of the most beneficial things that I did starting out was I read that book, the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, where they talk about words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and physical touch. I read it and then I started applying it to my employees as I talked to them and did things, and really changed how I approached employees. So yes, those pizza parties, those cookouts, they appeal to a certain demographic of employees. But there are, lots of employees that do not appeal to. So for example, I have a very introverted employee. He's one thing I discovered in our one-on-one communications is that he has a couple cats. He's really fond of them. I have a couple cats. I love my cats. Just something that we really, chat about and bond over whenever we're in the break room. So now in my rotations of charity and not-for-profit events, I always make sure, every couple months I work in Lollipop Farms or the SPCA, one of the local kind of animal charities. And I know he really appreciates it. He tells me, he's like, hey, I like that we're doing this. So it's really talking to, those employees that are disinterested and figuring out how you can, you just slightly tweak what you're doing and you can get them interested in it.
Yeah. That's great. I appreciate it. Before we go into the questions, I just appreciate the candor from everybody here and just share, hey, this happened on my watch, or this is something that we ended up going through the challenge, because I think from all of that, I heard a lot of great lessons on here's what you could do to prevent that on your end and to overcome it, right? Anything from, individual, just getting to know employees a little bit more to understand how you can weave in programs that impact them, to obviously the importance of communication and how often we don't do enough of it. And even when we think we do, we need to do more, it's like, that's the constant game. So I appreciate the candor. So let's go to the questions. We do have a couple. And so the first one that I see here is from Nicole, and her question. So anybody who wants to jump in and share your thoughts, what kind of team building activities do you suggest for hybrid environments? So what kind of team building activities have you tried, or are you thinking about trying for hybrid work environments?
I can chat a little bit about this. One thing, because again, we've been hybrid for decades just because of the makeup of our industry. If the company can accommodate that, we pay employees to volunteer. So if there is a monthly, like going and assisting at the SPCA, or, we do a cleanup, community cleanup, and we pick a spot in conjunction with something else. If there's something that can be done, and again, it's not going to be 10 to 1, it's not going to be of interest to your entire workforce, but do that on a regular basis, and, quarterly maybe to start out with. If you haven't done it, that gets employees out. They know they're going to get paid for it, and maybe it's just 2 hours or something like that, but it gets them doing something of interest to them, but also meeting other employees.
Great.
I would say for those remote and hybrid employees, the one thing that I mentioned that did work well for them were those nerd out events, using the teams, because oftentimes, especially tech employees, they were showing you stuff on screens anyhow, or showing you software, or showing you a video game. So, it's something you can, a little bit easier to adapt, a nerd out type thing where people can, hey, where I'm at home, maybe they want to show off things that you wouldn't want them to bring to the office. It works out good.
That's great.
Ronnie, I'm going to steal that tagline. That's going to be a nerd out for me. So next event.
I mean, we certainly have had some of those similar things. I agree, Joyce. I really love that name. We, do everything from coffee hours to happy hours. I think one of the things that what makes, some of the events interesting is really asking the team to come up with the activity. And so you're, giving people the responsibility to bring back ideas and work together to deliver something. So you're not having to come up with the ideas, and it's something that will be meaningful to the group that's putting it together. Definitely have found that to be, something that people comment on those activities the most, how much fun they had, how much they enjoyed it and appreciate it. So, giving people the ability to control what you do with your team building activities.
Yeah, just putting it out there is like an opportunity to not only, find great ideas, but also make their voices heard.
To lead.
What do you think? Yeah, to lead. Exactly, Marcy. One question that just came in is Gen Z. What is up with Gen Z? so I think what they mean by that is, what are your thoughts on this new, young, interesting part of the workforce that, I think I read something recently that over the next 5 years, Gen Z and millennials are going to make up over 50% of the workforce. So obviously, we need to figure this out. But what are your thoughts? What do you think that you've noticed around Gen Z at the workplace?
I think one thing that's important is not to put them all in the same bucket. I'd obviously, being a small company, I got to watch what I say, but you can have two extremes there. You can have some that are the end up being top-notch rock stars. And then I've seen others that are on the other side and, need a lot more coaching. So, I try really hard not to judge them on the generationally, being more right wing. I definitely want to judge them, but, when I see them in practice, when I see them at work and see them in practice, they do seem to be, I have to treat them as individuals, and they seem to, definitely be their own, some are going to be all-stars and some are not going to be.
Yeah.
I think a couple things we're noticing, and we're trying to sort of dig into this and figure out, what do you do with it? But we feel like we have more sort of 1 to 2 year people leading the organization. And so, is it something that we're doing? Are we, is it that we're not making good hiring decisions? Or is it simply that, they're still figuring out what they want to do? They tried it. They didn't like it. They figured it out relatively quickly and moved on. So what does that mean to us? How do we sustain ourselves through that, where you're kind of constantly turning over? The other thing that we've noticed too is, and maybe Ronnie, I think you said this, but it is a group of team members that really do get a lot out of being in the office. So, if you don't have an office for them to go to where there are people that they can really engage with, they may not make the connection, which is sort of scary when a lot of your workforce is hybrid, and you really have to figure out ways to make that happen. So just those are a couple of our observations recently.
But you, Joyce, any thoughts on Gen Z?
I have a lot of thoughts on Gen Z, but probably not appropriate for this. But because I'm assuming we're all not in Gen Z. One of the things we do, again, and I, like Marcy said, it probably takes, if we're hiring right out of college, they're 21, 22, 23 years old. I've conveniently forgotten what I was like at that age. And, we make sure that their coach is not a boomer. We make sure that their coach is either someone who's been here 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or in that millennial. So we make sure that there's not a huge gap in the understanding of the generations. I think to Ronnie's point, not all of them are the same. As much as it's easier for us to remember who's who if we put them in, predetermined buckets. But one of the things that we live by here is, we certainly have a team environment, and we have, rules and regulations, and like every company, an employee handbook or playbook. But that we value the team, but without losing sight of what the individual needs. And every individual needs something different to feel valued. So if somebody needs, an extra day off of bereavement or something off, they just need an extra day off for mental health, or they need some, is there a way to make that employee feel valued, even if it doesn't fit in the preconceived, box of stuff that we do? So, I think that's important. Making sure that they get the support they need in that generation. It takes them a couple of years to understand, wow, I have to cut my hair, or I have to wear different clothes, or, not what you wear to the college class. We give them a year, but we also give them constant feedback in a way that's supportive.
Right.
I think they also seem to get a bad rep because, this is the first time we've had this many generations all in the workplace.
Right.
So, I think I remember the same thing when I was graduating and working about us, lazy millennials.
Right.
And it was just because, we were going to work with, those same boomers who are now unhappy with the next generation. So I think it's kind of a challenge of the time, and just a challenge of the change in the workforce. It's just.
Yeah, it just seems like it's a cycle, right? Like you remember, what was it, like 10 years ago, how many thought pieces were around crazy millennials? And then you go 20 years forward, Gen X, and like it's always kind of like, what are these kids doing? But then that's just kind of how it all goes, right? The first couple of years out of college, who knew what we'd be doing? We're all kind of a little like, what's going on? What is this world?
Right.
So we just got to be patient. We just got to be patient, understanding. So we're out of time. I really want to appreciate and thank all of our panelists here, Ronnie, Joyce, Marcy. Thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot. I'm sure anybody out there that's been with us has learned a lot of like just innovative approaches to workplace collaboration, a lot of great things. So just want to once again thank you for your commitment and to your time to be here with us today and share so much in your candor. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you out there that were listening along. Hope this was really helpful, and hope that you learned a lot and that it was worth your time. We really appreciate it. And so on behalf of the Rochester Business Journal and on behalf of Best Companies Group, I want to thank you for being here. And I just want to remind you that it's a journey to create a best place to work. Take it one step at a time. If you ever have any questions around any of that, feel free to send me an email, as I mentioned on my note here, jzapeta@bestcompaniesgroup.com, or go to bestcompaniesgroup.com for more information on how we could support you in any way. Until then, remember to be well, do good, and be the best. Thank you, everybody. Take care.